Hey everybody, it's Chance here from Heavy. I wanted to put together this little rig rundown video, actually an update. I've already got one, but that's a couple years old, and got a few little toys and tricks that I wanted to show to y'all. But yeah, let's fucking get going here. This is goddamn awkward talking to myself in a room. This is weird, but you know, maybe this will be helpful to y'all at some point. Anyway, so the main brain still remains being Helix here. Mr. Helix man, I have gone through one of these already. The other one kind of like broke down and started doing all crazy shit. This one kind of tweaks out and has a little aneurysm every once and again, but for the most part it's rock solid for how shitty I treat this motherfucker. So fantastic. The only difference that I've done here, or the main difference that I've done here in the setup, is I don't really use the amp models in the Helix. They're great, I love them, they're really versatile, but I really miss that that tube amp feel, and I always have the digital amp models in the Helix as a backup. But I picked up this thing over here called the Kraken. First off, it looks insanely cool, like to start with. And it's, I think it's like kind of like a modified 5150. It's from a amp maker in the UK called Victory Amps, I believe. Yeah, so what's really cool here is like bear with me here. I'm fucking rambly and I'm not good at this, but essentially when I say this is the brain, meaning I control everything on this board from here. So let me go quickly over how this thing is routed. All these crazy cables over here are my 4 effects loops. And effects loops, it's not really kind of like, maybe that's a bad name for it because it's, you know, it's not necessarily an amp effects loop. It's really more like a send and a return, where I can send a signal out to a pedal or a group of pedals and return that signal from that pedal or group of pedals. And I have 4 of those. That's why there's 8 patches here. There's 1 in, 1 back out. 1 out, 1 back in. And I put together this little snake here, Mr. Slithery Snake, that goes to a junction box. Like that junction box I built myself. It's essentially just 8 jacks on one side, 8 jacks on the other side, so that I don't have to go and plug the you know, these cables directly into all these crazy pedals, because that would take a million years when you're setting up on stage, so fuck that. But yeah, so I've got 4 effects loops. We'll go into what is going on with those later. I've got 2 sends, one that I send my guitar signal from, one that I send my bass signal from. Again, more details to come. And then I have a MIDI out, which controls MIDI for my Boss vocal performer thing here. So, going from right to left, we've got each effects loop. So I've got an effects loop for both of my amps. So for my guitar amp I mentioned, I've got the Kraken, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but right in front of that is running a sidechain compressor, which is a brand new thing that I've started to do. I'll show that in a bit. And the second loop, I'm running my bass amp, essentially. It's not tube, but it's fantastic. It's made by Nolly, who's a fantastic producer out of the UK, with Darkglass. Darkglass is kind of like the Mercedes-Benz of bassists' toys. This one's called the Atom, which is aggressively distorting advanced machine. Fucking hilarious, amazing, incredible. The third loop, I run my drive pedal chain. Usually I have just this fuzz, which is a pedal that I built. It's like a kit of the Sun O Life pedal from Earthquaker Devices. You can buy the kit and build it yourself if you want. That's what I did, and I painted it with my friend Svenja. I'll either switch between that or this over here, which isn't actually plugged in right now because I had to do some crazy shit on stage because we were having power problems the other night. But this is a Black Hawk fuzz pedal. But I like to run an overdrive into my fuzzes because it gives you all the fun of the fuzz with the attack of the overdrive at the very, you know, like when you're down picking. So that's the fuzz section. And then the last, I've got this, which is another pedal I've built, which is a Earthquaker Devices Afterneath kit. I scratched it up and made it look all drone-doomy. Shouts out Zoig. But yeah, so those are the 4 signals that I've got here. And all of the patching happens in here. You can see right here is the top signal, which goes to the guitar, and bottom here is the bass signal. Typically what I'm doing here, like they're completely separate. I'm running all these disabled things are like things like whammies and, you know, phasers and all sorts of things that I can turn on or off as I see fit. But I'll run into a drive that's either modeled or I'll run the fuzz into the Kraken, which is this, what do you call it? Effects loop, I guess is what they're still calling it. Effects loop 1, which is the Kraken, and then out into, you know, like I can turn on and off the effects loop for the reverb here. You can see there. And then I've just got like some gains, and you know, all these yellow ones here are gates because I'm very noisy. And that's just the guitar signal. Let me play a little doodly doot doots with that real quick. Anyway, yeah, that's the guitar signal. I should mention that I've been running very primarily my baritone here. This baritone is very, very special to me. The only update that I've done here is I've switched out the stock pickups for Blade Master pickups from a pickup maker called Lawler. They were the only kind of like baritone, or not baritone, but like Jazz Master modern pickups I could find, and they sound fucking great. So I really love this guitar. It's one of a kind. When I bought it from a buddy for a couple $100, and since then, like, people have learned of their powers, and they're really expensive now, and it's hard to find because they stopped making them, I think. But yeah, it's actually Squier, like fucking hell yeah for Squiers. Anyway, so moving on from the guitar signal over to the bass signal. So here I actually I've tried fucking every pitch pedal under the sun, and I'm telling you, the Helix Poly Pitch is the best, at least for what I've used it for. It tracks super well. It retains a lot of the sounds that you need. It's got tons of options here. One thing that I really like is like being able to change the tracking mode, and you can EQ. So like when you drop down a very brittle signal down to a low signal, it can get clicky or sometimes too woofy. And this EQ really like helps you kind of dial that in and add back in some of those frequencies that you miss when you do pitching. What's really cool about it is I can, another great thing about the Helix is I can automate a lot of these things. So like you see this says -12, that means it's an octave down. I can also switch to -24, so 2 octaves down. So I do that for our song called Finfred, on a part where I'm, really, really handy. You can hear it drops down an extra octave. Sorry if the audio is kind of crappy, but I'm recording through a Zoom handheld recorder. But anyway, all right, we talked through that. We talked through the bass signal. Let's talk through 2 of my fun favorite things. First is vocals. I sing and play guitar, and so I want to be able to turn effects on and off as I'm singing. So let me see if I can find an example of that. Yeah, here's a good example. So my Boss VE-500 is fantastic. It does gating, it does compression, it just makes everything kind of pull together live, so you don't have that just raw dog vocal sound. You get a little bit of processing. I used to have tuning on it, but it picked up too much stage noise and started sounding weird, so I haven't done that yet. But what I do use it for is like octave down, so you can see from the Helix I've got this MIDI cable that actually goes into my junction box and then into the Boss. I can turn the harmony on and off. You can see that turning on and off just from the Helix. And I can also hold this down, this Vox delay. It's a momentary switch, so when I hold this down, I get a really, really long delay. So I can do like a yeah, and it'll just it'll just go for days, and that's really useful to do while I'm playing, so I don't have to futz around with things with my hands, or have a sound guy, because Jesus Christ, it would be cool if we could afford one of them. Anywho, the last fun little tool that I've really, really loved is this sidechain compressor. So it's not really a sidechain compressor, it's a compressor that I only use for sidechaining. So I just picked it up. It's from Empress. It's a Mark II whatever. I don't know. You guys can find it. The cool thing about this is I don't use it out of like the box like to compress my guitars, because it's, I don't really use compressors like that. But my signal, when I send it to this effects loop, goes straight into the compressor and then out of the compressor into the Kraken, and it's always on. But the sound, like the gain reduction, isn't triggered by, your frets and playing. It's triggered by an external source. You can see there's a cable coming out of the top of that into a jack over here that trails off into the distance. That is going to our kick drum. And so every time the kick drum hits, the volume of my guitar signal goes down during the kick, just during the kick. So it gives this really awesome pumping effect. I wanted to give you just a quick look at the back line. So, like I mentioned before, these two cables here go out of there and then over to my wonderful stack here of orange cabinets. And sitting on top of those, so you don't get enough volume, like it's not an actual amplifier getting line volume out of the Helix. You can't just run it into a cab. You need a couple of fucking things to do that. And those fucking things are these Seymour Cuncan Powerstages, and these are absolute amazing animals. They're incredible. So the guitar one goes to the 170, which is 170 watts, and then the bass one goes to the 200, which is 200 watts. What's particularly great about this is without having to go to my pedal board and mess with a bunch of stuff, I can just flat out crank all of that going into this signal. And then when I set up on stage, I can just, this controls the level, and it's more like a master volume rather than an actual volume, so I get the same tone at any volume that I want. And depending on the room, like if it's a bigger or smaller room, I can EQ at the very end of the chain here. Super helpful for bass too, if like, we're playing a smaller place and I need to turn the bass signal down, or we're playing a bigger place and I need to turn it up. But yeah, this I also like run I send the front of house the DI from this rather than having them mic it up. It's just easier to just plug it in the XLR and get that signal. It's got this little cab sim button that gives it a little bit of a simulation running through a cab. But yeah, man, that's the guitar setup. So. Thanks a bunch. Take a listen to the album when you guys have a
have some time. We worked really hard on it, and we appreciate y'all. Love y'all. Bye.